This is the Lifted Spirits podcast, where we raise a glass, share encouraging thoughts and stories, and discuss how we find meaning through art, friendship, family, business, and everything in between. You're hearing Coral Bradshaw play the violin right now. She is a mean violinist and pianist and painter and poet and all sorts of other things. So let's hear what she has to say.
Well, here we are.
Here we are.
Coral Bradshaw,
Hi,
the
friends.
one and only. And we've got this Lyre's American malt. It's like a mock whiskey thing. It's pretty good. It's a little smoky, kind of like a maple-y bourbon, but non-alcoholic, which is nice. I'm gonna have to say, but it's pretty good. So you are a painter, a violinist, a guitar player. You play piano too, right? Or did I make that up? Are there art forms you don't do?
I have yet to do pottery, although I would like to. I think I would get really into pottery, but I also think then I might not be able to get out of pottery. This is what I observe amongst those who partake.
Dangers.
So.
What about dancing? Do you do any kind of dancing?
No.
No. Hard no.
Not a hard no.
Okay, not a hard no.
When I was a child, I did take lessons from a wonderful lady named Mrs. Hardison at the Corvallis Academy of Ballet.
Oh,
She was
okay,
lovely.
that makes sense. I was thinking like,
but I
surely...
don't think that translates into being an adult dancer of any kind.
Yeah, but I had thought like, surely you did ballet or something like that at some point, and sure enough, you did. And then also just, this is just off the top of my head, but do you know how to get a passport within 2 weeks? Is that a skill that you have?
You know, amongst my very niche skill set, it so happens I have trained myself in that particular one.
Yes, this is not the beginning of our history, but the middle of our history with Coral. My wife and Alex and I, we were going on an Italy trip for a wedding, and we needed a babysitter. We were just going to pay someone in Italy, but then we realized that just paying for a friend's ticket to come along and help would be pretty much the same price. And so we bought Coral a ticket like 2 weeks before the trip. And she was like, the only problem is I don't have a passport. And we thought, oh, well, that's kind of a big problem. And because I just thought, there's no way you can get a passport in less than 2 weeks. You can.
As it turns out, you bought the ticket before I even had the passport. We had faith.
Yes, faith. Sometimes you just gotta take that leap of faith and see what happens.
It's true. Whatever gets you to Italy.
Yep. And so she made it to Italy and almost didn't make it out of Italy a few times. Well, that was on the first night. What was it that happened? Like I had gone home with you. Alexis was doing her own thing.
Yeah, we kind of had solo nights.
Yeah.
And I split off and was exploring Rome. And we had been there long enough to kind of teach ourselves the subway system to a degree. But the subway system is supposed to stay open till like 11 p.m. or so. And on this night, I was descending into the subway to get home, as I knew how to do, the competent American tourist that I was. And they drew a gate across, across the subway tunnel, and they were just like, there is no subway, you must take the bus. So I spent the next somewhere in the territory of 5 hours attempting to navigate the Roman bus system.
Yeah, we were concerned after a while because I was like, man, if Coral got kidnapped on the first night, that'd be a real buzzkill for this trip. And so we were glad that you weren't. I literally ran to that subway station because I was like, okay, I don't want Coral getting stranded in Rome. And then because your phone was dying,
my phone was dying. That was the most significant problem of that evening. Was that there came a point where I messaged you to let you know where I was, but my phone died while I was sending the text. So I didn't actually know if you were coming.
Yeah, and I just knew she was going to be at this particular station at a certain time, but then I got there and you weren't there, and I waited for a long time until like literally the last train at 11:30 p.m. And I was like, well, I guess she's gonna get home somehow. And you got a taxi, so it all worked out.
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did.
Anyway, that's our little Italy trip. Which also, I'm just thinking, reminiscing of Italy before we move on. If there were just any like meaningful highlights from that trip of the scenery or whatever, or the different cathedrals that spoke to you as an artist.
Oh, there were a good many cathedrals. The Vatican and St. Peter's Basilica was a little bit disconcerting in its magnificence. I had to think about that for a long time. It like
Me too.
brought feelings up inside of me.
Yeah, I remember going in there the first time and thinking, I want to be Catholic because whatever they've got going on, this is awesome.
I want a piece of this.
Yeah, but then that didn't happen.
Still got to partake
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
beauty. Yeah, no, Venice was beautiful. And we went into a pretty particular little cathedral when we were in the Dolomites, kind of on the corner of Austria.
Yeah.
And that one has lingered in my memory for sure.
Same. It was simple. I mean, for a cathedral, but it,
Simple in its magnificence.
yeah, exactly. But it was lined with those statues of the different martyrs, and they were all holding the instrument that killed them. Like one of them had a hacksaw, and because I think he was sawn in two or something like that. And I thought, that's metal, and pretty
Truly.
cool. Yeah, truly.
Truly.
A saw is metal. That's how that works.
Yeah.
But anyway, who are you? Like, what's your thing? Like,
The hard
what's your
transition.
yeah. Well, now we're done with Italy. We'll move on. Like, who are you? What's your history of like how you got into your various art forms?
You know, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so like the oceans and the mountains feel very much a part of me. And I think that kind of lent itself to an attraction toward like wild spaces and beautiful things and spaces of solitude and just wildness in general. Getting into art didn't feel like much of an attempt for me. We always had music around. Like we always had musical instruments around, and so like we always had a piano, and so I always played. Um, I can't really think of a particular time when I sat and like decided like, oh, I want to do the arts. It was just what I always loved, and I think how I always expressed myself. So reaching for those things was always very instinctive and intuitive for me.
Was there anything that you started with? Like, did you start with music? Did you start with painting? Or
I started with music well beyond I ever ventured into visual art. Visual art was a very like late start for me, actually, but we always had a piano in our house. My mother had played the piano, and she started teaching each of us how to play when we were like around 4 years old. I have a few siblings. And so she would start us on like the Alfred's basic beginner books that every piano student has been through at some point. And so I was about 11 when I got called out on the fact that I could not read a single note of music. I would play everything by ear, so I would mimic my older siblings when I was going through the piano books. So it was actually very difficult to get me to like deliberately sit down and train in anything. I was very resistant to being taught because it was instinctive for me to do what I liked to do. There's also virtue in being made to learn things you don't want to learn, like how to actually read music. So I've adapted.
Yeah,
as I've grown.
It's still a struggle for me to read music. I'm more hear things, but I do find it weird when people are super into the technicalities of music, like play the harmonic minor fifth, and like I don't even know what those things mean, and it
sure sounds important,
jargon.
But
yeah, it's like, does it sound good or does it not? That's my litmus test. And who are some of your artistic inspirations, both teachers that you've had personally and just like pop icons or whatever?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like I think it is challenging to pin down artistic inspirations because I think my path toward art and music was instinctive enough. There weren't really a lot of people doing something that I like looked to and was like, I want to do that. And I didn't really have a lot of exposure to different visual artists and the music that we listened to, I feel like it was a fairly small library when I was a kid. So I've always leaned toward like sort of more like Celtic folksy music. I think that's always sort of struck a tone in me. And that's what got me into violin, because I always played the piano. And when I heard sort of more like Celtic folksy music, I was just like, ooh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of fiddle in there. I would like to be doing that.
Yeah. Anytime I hear that kind of music, my Irish comes out and just like the top of my body stays still, but I do the little jig with
Your
my
feet
legs.
start clogging.
Yeah. Yeah. It just comes
It just
out.
happens. It just happens.
Yeah. It's a reflex.
Mm-hmm.
Totally subconscious.
Yeah.
And what is it about art in general that just like does it for you? Like, is it a cathartic thing of how you process and work through your feelings, or is it just to create? I'm sure it's all these sorts of things, but yeah, what is it?
It is cathartic, for sure. I think one of the best ways I've come up with to describe why art and music matter to me is I think I identify it as like a prayer language for me. It feels like a way that I get out what is inside and also feel a sense of connection. It's a very isolated activity in its own way, but it's always been a source of connection for me in a way that's kind of tough for me to describe. So I think that as a form of expression, but I think I've always reached for beauty. I think I've always reached for a sense of beauty. And I think also I try to make sense of darkness or difficulty or isolation and aloneness through beauty. There's something redemptive about that to me. And so I think for me, art has often come out of a place of isolation. And it's given me a sense of connection in the midst of that. So I think that's something that's kept me reaching for it over time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can definitely relate. Like you're tapping into something when you hit the right chord, and it's like the chord that David played in Please the Lord or wherever. You're just like, whoa.
That specific chord.
Yeah. Or that pleased me, the chord that David played, and just like, And why don't you've got some of your paintings here. Why don't you just like showcase a few? We'll cut to some pictures and closer ups of this. So
yeah, so this painting is actually a prototype of a much larger painting, which I did not bring today because it's in the process of being varnished. But this painting was titled The Dark Night of the Soul. And it's really interesting because I think I've always painted things in really vivid color. And so to paint something that is like set in the darkness was a very different sort of prompt for me. And the concept of sort of a dark night of the soul is one that has gained a lot of significant meaning to me, I think especially in context of like imagination and creativity. Like what do we do in environments where there's not a lot of light? And so in this particular painting, there's just a very, very tiny amount of light in the midst of the darkness. But I think in my heart, something I've gained a lot of sensitivity to is that darkness accentuates light so much. I think in the context of how we see things, how do I have imagination toward this environment that I'm in? How do I experience it? A lot of the sources of like light in my life, they may seem very small in comparison to whatever it is that I'm enduring at the time, but I think that's accentuated their meaning. I think that's made them a lot more hopeful and a lot more valuable. And so that was kind of the concept, I think.
Yeah.
Behind.
That one's really cool.
Very black little painting. It's a somewhat different experience on a very large canvas.
Yeah, I saw the big one too,
but,
and it's more impressive.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, and it's even similar to like this setup. We've got the moody, black, dark background and the light right here. So
here we are, and the intensity of it all.
But yeah, you can keep going.
Okay, you were happy that I brought this one.
I was really excited. It's literally just a tree, but like it's so cool, and just the lighting is so perfect as a photographer. Like, I wish I could find this kind of lighting just everywhere.
I mean, I wish I could find this kind of lighting in the natural world as well.
It's a little fantastic. Oh, yeah, and cut to that too. But what was the concept behind that one too?
Trees have always been a source of like really deep significance to me. They're an image of resurrection is the best word that I know how to put to it. This cycle of life that is so consistent in all of us and in all of the world surrounding us, and has this process of death attached to it. It's not an uncommon image, the idea that like a seed has to die before it goes into the ground and then it gives birth to this new life. But it's one that's been increasingly significant to me over the years. I think I see that cycle in myself, and I see that in the people around me. There's this there is this pattern of like dying to things and experiencing what feels like a wasteland, or what feels like the loss of something, the death of something, often even a part of ourselves. And yet the kind of fertile ground that leaves for new growth to happen is, I think, incredibly hopeful. And to me, I think I've always collected like pine cones, and in particular, because they're just very collectible.
That's true.
But to me, they've always been kind of a symbol of promise that even in the midst of what feels like death and dying and loss, and even the loss of ourselves, there's this innate, inbuilt sort of promise of a new life, because I think we're bent toward life. We're bent toward light. There's even a biblical passage that speaks to that, which has increased my love for trees a lot. It's in the book of Job, but it draws a picture of a tree that has been cut down to the roots, and yet it says there is hope for a tree. For even though it is cut down, it will live again. At the very scent of water, it will put forth roots, and it will live again. And I think there is something about people that we are bent toward what brings us life. We even at the very scent of it, that's been a pretty powerful poetic image to me. Just at the very sensation that there is life waiting for us somewhere, we will start to reach for it, because I think it's what we're made for. We're made to live. And even in the midst of like death and darkness, to be able to bend ourselves toward that light, kind of even hearkening back to that little light on the water.
Yeah, I think it's easy to be drawn to either extreme of lights or darks. The stuff in the middle can feel kind of hazy, but like, for example, even part of this podcast of why I started it was because so much of the content I was consuming just made me annoyed. Of like, it was stuff on YouTube trying to pit people against one another, like, look at what this person or group is doing, and just like, they're idiots, and just like, I don't want to be that. I don't know. I don't want to be drawn. It's so much easier to be drawn into either tearing someone down and death and like criticism, and then on the flip side, when something's really real, you connect with it too. And so trying to fill my life with more of those things that are life and actually real, and have less and less of the critical eye, because the world has no shortage of cynics and critics and everything in between. And I think art is one of the main solutions to the modern world of just like, we need to just, all the hippie nonsense. Let's stop fighting and sing some songs together, have jam sessions at our houses and stuff like that.
I mean, I think it would be a great way to be.
Maybe I can organize, especially, okay, not that this is like super political or anything, but it being, well, I mean, it is political, but I'm not. Anyway, what I'm saying, it's an election year. I wonder if I could get together a bunch of people later on this year who really disagree for like a hoedown, that'd be fun. Because it's hard to fight with somebody when you're square dancing and swinging somebody around.
It's true. It's true. No, I think that's actually a really beautiful concept surrounding art, one that has mattered a lot to me. And not just in like visual art and music, but what are the things that bring delight? What are the things that we can kind of almost universally like come to as sources of comfort and togetherness? And what do we like, how do we partake? Even if it's like tea, or a square dance, or, just kind of how do we evoke and how do we appeal to that innate, almost universal sense of like, this is good, this is wholesome, and like find unity within it.
Yeah, and hopefully build an appetite for it where you no longer want the trashy, critical stuff anymore. And because I still struggle with YouTube sometimes, where it's like, I know the algorithm wants me to click this thing, and then it's going to start recommending all these things about why these different people are stupid. And that's not what I should be listening to, because I'm really the stupid one if I'm clicking on it. All those videos that are like, so-and-so destroys this person, or, they crush them with logic, and you're like, this is so inhumane and shouldn't be consumed by humans. But go ahead.
Well, and yet it appeals to curiosity. I like what you say about building an appetite for things that are more like innately beautiful and good and whole, because I think we have a lot of curiosity. I think that's built into us. But what is like cultivated by what's set before us is something that I think it takes a lot of willpower to like exercise some control over, like, how do we cultivate our appetites toward what brings more peace, what brings more like goodness and good things.
Yeah. You're welcome to grab another of the paintings.
This is a pretty old one, actually.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen this one. I really like all your stuff. I'm not just like brown nosing or anything because you're my friend, but like this is my kind of style. Like if I could paint, this is the kind of stuff I would want to paint.
That's so exciting to me to hear. Oh, that makes me so happy. Yeah, I think kind of harkening back to like
the little birds and everything. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm so glad you did. Yeah, I think the two things that you'll find pretty consistent in the art that I make, or at least the stuff that I look back on, is environments and then just kind of spacious color and light. And I've learned that I'm a very environmentally driven person. I'm very affected by what's around me, and have gained sort of a sense of appreciation and also the necessity of curating that environment. Kind of, what do I set around me that evokes this, that cultivates my appetite for the beautiful. And so I find that I've made a lot of art in my time. Like, what I'm drawn to is more like, what can someone connect with that puts them into a space where their soul can kind of unfold.
Yeah.
And receive something beautiful, but also like, I think for me, a lot of that is more so a setting for a person to connect with themselves. I find that the best art takes me into a whether it's a feeling or a headspace that gives me a sense of like, oh, I'm alive right now. And yeah, I don't know. I think I say this because this is clearly just an environment of a thing, but I think
Yeah, I'm definitely, as a photographer, videographer, I'm way more interested just by nature and environment than in people, which can be a problem at times, and is why Alex and I make a good team doing weddings together, because I'm always like, whoa, this is a cool landscape. We should put a person in it or something. And I'm thinking more of the frame and the landscape.
And you send them a gallery and they're like, that's great, but we didn't see the bride in any of these shots.
Yeah. And whereas Lex is like, oh, well, here's the connection between the people that's good. And so you work together. And obviously I love connection between people, but I think of settings as like okay, I have to set my frame and then I'm going to put a person in there. Like, they're secondary almost. And that's just how I think. And so, yeah, I love geometry and landscape and seeing different symmetries and asymmetries, and because this is very symmetrical, not exactly, but it's very just pleasing to the eye. And I kid you not, I just went to Crystal Bridges. Okay, should I say this? Because I try to keep positive. I don't, because again, I just talked about I shouldn't be criticizing things
I
so
guess
much.
you can always edit it up.
Yeah, but I'm just not impressed. There's this big art museum around here. I'm just not all that impressed with most of the stuff in there. It's for me, for art to be good, it has to immediately catch my eye in some way, and then from there could be infinite depth that you can draw from it. But there's so few things that I even care enough to look at for a while. Whereas this, I just see it immediately. I'm like, I want to look at this. And in the same way that like a good movie shouldn't have to convince you that it's a good movie. It should just be a good story that can also have infinite depth as you look into it. But you shouldn't have to it shouldn't be labor to make someone enjoy your art.
Yeah, it's got to have chemistry with you. I think that's really significant because I often feel that way in art museums. I tend to be drawn toward the more like landscapey, again, environment pieces where there's like a lot of light and cloud and like understanding for mood and depth. But I have an appreciation for it, but a lot of art just doesn't draw me in. And that's something that I think people have asked me a lot over time, is kind of harkening back to the first question, like what artists do you love? Who inspires you? And it's really difficult for me to narrow it down to like, well, this is a genre, or this is a classical artist who's inspired me. I've never really felt drawn to that. I think it took having a very different experience of art and kind of something beautiful for visual art to be something I was even tempted to do. And even then, I've done a lot of art that is maybe more like commercial or design oriented, and that's fun. But to me, like that's not art making to me in the sense that makes it feel like soulful to me. So I feel like a pretty strong disconnection from a lot of art. And I think you're right. I think there's that chemistry between you and something when you know, like, oh, this speaks to me. Yeah. And that doesn't happen with just anything or just something really technically proficient.
Yeah. And obviously everyone's style and choice and things like that and preferences are different. But I just always think in a whole art museum, shouldn't there be something that speaks to me, and why is there something wrong with me? Or, because I've been to several art museums. We were at one in Texas in like 2018 and had this exact same conversation with Alexis of like, I walked out depressed because I told her like, man, art is supposed to be like the frontier of vision for humanity, and artists are supposed to be pushing boundaries and inspiring and asking these big questions. And I just felt like it was random colors and shapes, and like very modern stuff that might it be like, oh, that's kind of pretty, but like didn't make me want to, like, didn't make me feel alive,
Yeah. I think really similarly, concept and just soulfulness. I think one reason why I've been drawn to environments is because it allows me to inhabit it. But even then, there's got to be something ethereal there, I think, in the light or the setting that allows me to kind of like sit with a part of myself and experience. And yeah, I think there is a lot of art that I can appreciate for what it's trying to say, but I don't love the execution. So it is kind of a marriage of execution and is it saying something? Because if it's not necessarily speaking to, I don't know that all art has to have some distinct message. I think a lot of what I am innately drawn to create doesn't have a specific story so much as it for me, it's kind of an appeal to peace, an appeal to beauty, an appeal to engage with something beyond myself. And so I don't know that I would put the boundaries on art to say like it always has to say something, but there is a soulfulness there that I think when that's absent, I really struggle to connect with art. Yeah. Similarly, something can have soulfulness and like poor execution. Yeah. And we hold that as well.
Yeah. And maybe that from my perspective, which may or may not be correct, it seems like not all art has to be conceptual, but it seems like there's so little of it in the modern world. It's all very, I don't know all the terms, like is it postmodern or like modern art or whatever, where it's just, yeah, it seems very random and overly abstract, which again is still an art form and it's great, but it seems like that's most of what I see. And I would love to see more conceptual, and which I never even described this. I forgot I should do some audio for, because I still am learning how to do podcasting, but a description of is there a title for this?
I think I've been referring to that one as the far country.
Okay. That's such a perfect title. This is a fun exercise too, where I have to describe a painting.
I'm so excited.
Okay, so it's like a spiry, it's like a mountain, but but like it grew out of the earth, because it's planty, sort of, more than rocky, and lots of spires and trees and little flowers and birds flying. It's very orange and red. There's these pretty clouds in the background and birds flying everywhere. And it's just good. I'm trying to think of what other words I would use to describe this. What would be some of your own self descriptions?
Oh gosh, I'm so enjoying hearing you describe it. I never hear people describe my art. I think this painting and a lot of other paintings are just born out of a sense of longing for home. And I don't think I find that in anything immediate. So I think something about the upward reaching.
Yeah, that's okay. Sorry to cut you off real quick, but like that's you said it, and it like triggered in my mind. Like that's why I immediately connected with it, because there's like this upward trajectory where even if I'm like subconsciously feeling inspired because it's spires, to and like pointing to the sky and like the clouds and the sun and the light, and so it's like it's with the colors and the lighting, it's conceptual, even if it's very just baseline human concepts of like we love these things that are grand and reach to the sky and beautiful. But anyway, keep going.
No, I think truly it is very upward reaching, and that to me gives it movement while still being a very static thing. And so I think I'm realizing I don't know how to visually describe my own paintings because they're sitting right there.
It's harder. It is almost like, yeah, like you said, like a picture of if this was happening in real time, like it would still be growing up into the sky. So that is a what is it?
A far country.
A far country.
Yes.
Good titles too. Titles are important.
Thank you. Well, most of my art doesn't have titles.
That's okay.
So
yeah, I've written a little bit of poetry, but one of the hardest parts for me is coming up with a title, because you want something that feels meaningful and is cool and aesthetically pleasing, but isn't too cheesy, and it's a hard
I've
line
fallen
to
into
toe.
the little very convenient hole of just drawing forth phrases or lines from the poem and naming the poem after that.
Hey.
Because that way I'm just like, well, they'll know which one I'm referring to.
That's true.
They're looking for the one that has this word. Well, conveniently, they know which one it is because it's the title of the poem.
Very true.
It's also just lazy on my part, but
no, I mean that's totally valid. And so as an artist, this doesn't just have to relate to painting or music or whatever, but even currently, like we just started a new year. What are the things that are bringing you the most satisfaction and meaning in life, just in your day to day?
I've been really I think I've been finding a lot of satisfaction in human beings.
That's a good
at the
answer.
start of this year, which is like a great trajectory, I think, for the rest of the year. I have been, I think, a lot of kind of that, reflecting back on the fact that like a lot of art for me has been born out of isolation. I think a lot of what draws me to like find satisfaction in art, as I said, is that connection. And I think I've been really enjoying a place where I'm finding satisfaction like face to face with human beings over a cup of tea. And making crepes and going on walks. And I think it's been a really sweet season looking into the year of finding that satisfaction in like just the joy of human company, such as yourself.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be here too. And I'd probably have a similar answer to that question, because for so much of my life, I was an intensely people-oriented person, and I have a very obsessive personality. And it led to a lot of just like expectations of what a friendship should be and like the level of commitment that you want out of somebody. And it was hard for me to, I don't know, I would feel like an overbearing friend sometimes. Like, I just want to be with you, I just want to hang out. And like, we can only see each other every other month or something. And it's kind of discouraging. And I got a little disenfranchised with just people. and I never thought that I'd become a things person over a people person, but I kind of did, like which is a thing that a lot of guys, middle-aged guys, start going to their shop and just like being alone and doing their own little project.
Making things out of wood.
Yeah, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I became that person that I never saw myself as like, I'm just doing things and projects, and it's good stuff. It's not like any of it's inherently bad, but I'm almost just, I realized that I was having trouble caring about a lot of people, even people that I should care about. We'd maybe be together with cousins for family get-togethers, and I'd think like, well, I only see them every now and then, so like, why even bother like putting that much time and effort into talking to them? And it's very cold and cynical. And like, why would I think that of like my own family? That's awful. But I don't know, that's just where I was at. And so I realized that I'm like, okay, this year I haven't even set my goals. I don't set my New Year's goals until like I make them the whole month of January, because I know that
I think that's very wise.
Yeah, I'm not good at completing them before the New Year's, which is a terrible time because you got Christmas and New Year's that you're prepping for.
It's the worst time to be like making major decisions about who you want to be in a week.
Yeah, exactly. But I do actually do a really good job of making goals in January and then sticking with them for the rest of the year. Like last year I had about 10 goals and I accomplished 7 of them, which is like, that's a passing grade.
That's significant, yeah.
And so I'm still trying to work out what is my goal going to be, as far as I know it's like people oriented, but I want to have a specific goal of like, how am I going to like people again? Like, or I mean, I do like people, but just how am I going to fix that?
Yeah. Do you feel like there is something that like initiated a switch into maybe seeking more like isolation and things oriented? Or is there something in that like substitutes for human connection? Or do you feel it's just a step away from?
It definitely was a big substitute, because I think it was taking my obsession with trying to really find community and always having a hard time, and you try to get together with people, and then this person's sick and this person just kind of flakes, and this person texts you that they'll be there, but then they don't even show up, and just kind of getting tired of that and being like, you know what? Things don't really let me down. Like, I just can do a project and stay in my own world. And so my obsession with community, I just have to have an obsession. It just sort of switched to sort of business even, which is as a partial artist slash that being a part of my career of doing pictures and video, it was nice to invest in something worthwhile where like I've really focused on business and as well as just other projects. But yeah, and that's, so I don't regret that, but life is a big balancing act, and I'm trying to re-correct.
Yeah.
But do you feel like there's kind of, in a similar way, has there been something that used to be really important to you that no longer is, or vice versa, that like you used to think wasn't that important, but now has become very important to you. Maybe we'll do one at a time. So is there something that used to be really important to you that now is kind of like, meh?
That's a great question. I don't know that there are things in my life that have like lost all of their significance or importance, but I think they've been tempered, like heavily tempered as I've grown. I always struggled with my own balance between purposefulness and just like plain practicality as it comes to an approach to life. And so I think I can reflect on like my younger self and a very just intense need for all of life to be crafted in this very purposeful way, which was really challenging when I was like looking forward to a future where like a lot of my time would be in a career of some kind. And there aren't a lot of great alignments for super creative people between like what is lucrative and what feels deeply meaningful.
Yeah.
And when you're a very passionate person, a lot of like purpose is kind of rebounded to you through that lens of passion, which can be a deeply like meaningful way to experience life, but it can also be really disillusioning when life doesn't really allow you to inhabit that mold of doing things with inherent purpose all the time. So I think there is a part of me that I wouldn't say that it's different in terms of like I still really long for meaning and purposefulness, but I think I've been tempered to maybe perceive that more through the lens of like how do I inhabit life daily where I am content with like living wholeheartedly and allowing that to create purpose in spaces where I wouldn't automatically see it necessarily on the outset as a person looking into my life and having it described to me and being like, yeah, that sounds like a great job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's something that's definitely been a shift in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my ironically favorite little odd jobs that I used to do was working in chicken houses. And kind of like you're saying, from the outside, you wouldn't look in and describe it and think like, oh, that sounds really great. And a lot of it wasn't, it stunk really bad. But it was fun being out in the country and watching the little chickens like run. Well, there's the pecking order thing too. That was pretty brutal. It's real. And
it's the reason it's called a pecking order.
Yes. But I'm also a person who has to have meaning in my day-to-day life and career. And I knew this is fun doing this chicken stuff, but I have a hard time just getting passionate about it, And so it is hard to find that space, which for you, what would be your like dream career path that you feel like is even realistic? You like, not everyone's going to become Taylor Swift, but like if you, something that's, we'll say, just beyond your scope of what you believe you could do. Like, what's your dream?
I don't know what this hybrid would be. It's the same thing that I've always wanted. It's something between like creating meaningful things and deep connection with people. So in my brain, I'm just, I'm not quite sure how to formulate that into a thing. I think sharing artistic experiences with people has always, just without fail, resulted in this deep sense of just like, okay, this feels like a thing I'm meant to be doing. And so I can think of both art exhibit experiences and live music experiences where that sense of meaning is just really confirmed to me. What that would look like in a like realistic career-oriented scenario, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But I think I am pretty attentive at this point to trying to build those into my life more habitually than I have done.
I'm sure there's lots of ways, especially with the internet nowadays, that you could have like an online store. Yeah. Sell your art. And because, I mean, you could totally make good money selling stuff like this. Not that it's all about money, but like, finding
the
a way
necessities of life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What makes it sustainable. That's a part of myself I've really had to wrestle with because I'd say that's something I want to say I've lost. Really, again, I think it's just heavily tempered, but I still have a deep apprehension, if I'm really honest, when it comes to selling things for actual money. That feeling of commercializing a thing that is like innately in my soul. And like, no, this is just soulful. This is just for me, if I can connect people with a sense of beauty, that's just loving people the way that
Mhm.
I know how to best.
Uh-huh.
And so I've always had this deep, like, horrible apprehension
Oh, I
about
totally
monetizing
understand.
things that I'm just like, no, they're just here because they matter.
Mhm.
That's all I want them to be.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I'm growing towards that better. And I have done it,
Uh-huh.
but with great pain.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. I still really wanna make like a film that's self-produced and everything, real low budget. And initially my dream was like, I can make this, I can just put it on YouTube and like see what happens. And maybe that's what I'll do. But then the more I've thought about it, I've been like, man, but then I don't know, maybe there is something helpful to monetizing something, because if you're monetizing it, it means that people who are professional at getting stuff out or like putting it out into the world maybe better than you could, and that's almost what you're paying.
Right.
And I still hate the idea of someone like paying for like I just want everyone to be able to see it. I don't want there to be any paywall. um but yeah, so it's hard. I don't know, I don't have any answers for you there, but I can relate.
Yeah. No, and I've had to start looking at things in terms of like sustainability and resources.
Mhm.
And if people investing in your art is what mobilizes your art to accomplish what it's out there to do, which is
Mhm.
reach people, to whatever degree of excellence you can let it be
Mhm.
and exist at, then it doesn't have to be a bad, not wholesome thing for
Mhm.
there to be like actual funds
Yeah.
behind your project. We would just maybe like for those to magically appear
Yes.
without having to like
Uh-huh.
ask people for it
Mhm.
or
If
demand
anyone
it.
just wants to make a charitable donation.
It could just be a gift from the universe, a
Yes.
sign that what we're doing is right,
Yes.
deserves to exist.
Yeah, maybe we'll just walk out of this building and there'll be a pile of cash sitting there, crossing our fingers. Which we'd mentioned something that used to matter that doesn't as much. What about something that used to maybe not be on your radar as much that has become really important in your life?
Hmm. I think I convinced myself that I could find meaning and purpose, or that there was an avenue towards that sort of vibrant creative life that didn't involve deep relational connection with people.
Hmm.
I think that's always mattered to me, but I think it was to a degree denied me just in the way that I grew up. And so I denied myself of just kind of an imagination for that being in my life. And I have learned that I, as a person, simply do not operate that way. I cannot, no matter how hard I try. And so I think I used to really be very disconnected from the idea of being a person who like lives deeply rooted in community with others. And so I think the arts were always just kind of my far-flung reach for connection. It was just
Mhm.
kind of the hand that I got to extend into the world or the universe of like somebody somewhere far removed from me whom I will never meet may behold this thing or experience this thing and feel a sense of comfort
Mhm.
or like knownness
Mhm.
or peace or curiosity. And that in my brain was how I was going to affect the world, because it felt like the only option available to me as far as like how do I inhabit myself moving forward with kind of the story that my life has told me about myself, which is that this connection is kind of just what there is. It's what's been allotted to you.
Mhm.
And so I've learned that I actually kind of hold community with very like open, tentative fingers, because as meaningful as it is to me, I always fear it just kind of disappearing, being
Mhm.
taken away. And I've had to learn that like I need to grip it and I need to sink my roots down into it, and have like it is possible to have meaningful personal connections
Mhm.
with people, and for that to just exist in like a day-to-day way. And yeah, just like I think I am more maybe aware of that and am able to name that better, that that's just a necessity
Mhm.
and not something that I'm going to be able to inhabit myself or my life meaningfully without
Mhm.
prioritizing and without, in a way, like unfolding my arms to receive and expect. It's the expectation that's hard for me. Because I think life can tell us very different stories about what is dependable and what is there, and like what your resources are.
Yeah.
And who you are and how you operate based on who you've had to be, how you've had to operate. And so I think the role that certain things have played in my life, like art and music, those creative pursuits, their role has shifted. And I think I'm able to name better, like, why is this really important? And is this really like less important than the time that I spend with a person? And can that be okay?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's something, we just need to start our own little art cult thing. I'll buy some land. We can, drink beer and have little hoedowns and paint and
Incredible.
yeah, and share it on YouTube. And
I'm here for this commune.
yeah, I'll let you know.
2024. January's not over yet. It can still get added to your list.
Yeah, hey, it's there. Something with community. I got to add something with community. And so I'll brainstorm, let you know on that. One of my dreams is just to have land, like family land, with my extended family, like my immediate family, like brothers and sisters and their kids and parents. And because it seems like the family gets more and more fragmented, which is somewhat necessary in the modern world. Like, you get jobs, different places, but it seems really helpful to do life in more of a community and not be such a, I just don't know how I feel about the nuclear family. And ironically enough, in a lot of, maybe in the circles that I grew up in, it's like like it's put on a pedestal, like the nuclear family. But I've known some Mennonite people who, for them, they think of the nuclear family as like the beginning of the end, because it dissolved the like larger community, and then you're forced to do everything and like fulfill every role as a parent to your kids, and don't have much help because childcare is hard, and just like cleaning your house is hard. Not that like you're all cleaning each other's houses if you live in a cult, but you got help in community. And I'm incredibly thankful for all the people in my life, but I think of people who don't even have near of what Alexa and I have, and are just very much on their own with little family or friends who actually can help them in meaningful ways, and wanting to be a part of that solution. And definitely one of my dreams for doing podcasting would like reach an audience to where there could be in-person events too, and that are maybe even like, do one in Dallas, and maybe there's people who listen there, and then one here, and all these different places where you can connect with people who are interested in similar themes, and hopefully spark off friendships and stuff like that.
I love that.
We will see. This is a kind of fun question, sort of random, but just what's a time in your life that you'd love to replay?
That's tough. Because I think there are aspects of like meaningfulness in really hard seasons that I would like to not live through again.
Yeah.
But there's still a sweetness that has like made me who I am.
Oh, yeah.
And has really like, even I think really connected to how I started making visual art. There was a season that was really hard, but there was a lot of like sweet imagination in it that I really miss sometimes. As far as just a season itself that I would love to go back and inhabit again, I lived in Southern California for roughly a year and had this little ragtag group of friends who were lovely people. Some of the best people I've ever met, and they all had such incredible stories. Like, some of the best people I've ever known are people who have like been in recovery and had near-death experiences. And that's kind of oriented all of them to this sense of like meaningfulness in life and like hopefulness and curiosity toward other people. And so we would go out as a group into Hollywood and the Hollywood area, sometimes in like the middle of the night on the weekends. And we would just talk to people and like learn their stories. And I met so many people who've affected me and changed me just permanently, even just through one encounter. And that was a really like precious season to me. There was no trajectory for like what happens after. It was just like, we're here and we are going to go meet people and learn their stories. And like learn who we are.
Yeah.
And that's a very like sweet, quirky, like wonderful season in my life that I would happily go back and do again.
Mm. And then what's one of your just proudest moments as an artist? Not to just like hype yourself up so much, but like a time where you put something out into the world and it had like the exact type of reaction or interaction that you were hoping for.
Ooh. There are a couple, I think. I did an exhibit of paintings, including, no, this one wasn't created yet. But I did a painting exhibit when I was like finishing up my time in school, and people were able to come and like write their thoughts down in a little book. And so I didn't get like a ton of in-person feedback, but I was able to go back and read things that people had written. And I think perhaps one of the most meaningful, a very dear friend, someone who really, really like mattered a lot to me, came and observed the gallery and then flew away to a different country. And I haven't seen them in a really long time. But I went back and I recovered what they wrote in the book. And it was something along the lines of like, you made me feel again.
Mm.
And I think that reaction, I think that's what I want.
Mm.
Because I think that's something I reach for and long for as a person. Life numbs me. And I think that's one of the worst things it can do to people who are passionate and creative and curious and imaginative. For that to be numbed, it creates this distance between you and life. And I have felt that in myself during really hard seasons. And sometimes I go around thinking like, all I want to do is feel again. And to find something that makes me feel. And I think art as an outpouring that allows someone to kind of entangle their fingers in it and feel something. That to me is what I would hope to do. That's sort of the love that I would want to put out into the world toward other people, is the opportunity for them to feel and inhabit themselves again in like a whole way.
Yeah, it's amazing how much so many of the significant pivotal moments in life where I had just an epiphany or changed courses, how much of that was due to various art in my life, whether it's music or movies or just stories in general. Because obviously there's your life experience that leads you to all kinds of things, but then art is so influential in our minds, whether we even realize it or not. And I love the idea of creating things one day that are doing what that did for me for someone else, where you're like helping with someone's mental and spiritual evolution and encouraging them and saying, you know, whether it's, oh, I've been there and here's how I like got to the next point, and yeah, just like spurring someone on. And on the flip side too, of what's one of, more than the things you're proud of, what's one of your greatest insecurities or struggles as an artist? You can share as much or as little as you want.
For strength. My greatest struggles or insecurities. There's so many. I fear not being able to cultivate a life that feels meaningful.
Oh yeah, that's like my
Absolutely.
greatest fear.
It's terrifying.
We were driving, this was maybe 6 months ago. I was just driving and it was kind of rainy and thundering, and Soren, our 3-year-old, was in the back, and he said, "Oh, the thunder's scaring me, Daddy." And I said, "Yeah, it's pretty scary." And he said, "What are you scared of?" And I'm a big fan of just like talking to kids like they're adults, not in like a crude way, but I was like, you know what? I'm really afraid of living a life that's not meaningful. And I just like went into it and I was like, I know he doesn't understand any of this, but I'm still going to tell him, and just told him like exactly why I find it terrifying and how I'm afraid that like, what if you don't leave a legacy, you know, that's not just not for fame's sake or anything, but like you want to feel like your life mattered.
Yeah. You want it to have mattered. I think that's one reason this is something that's on my mind, as I had to like look through paintings and be like, what do I even bring?
Yeah.
And I grabbed the smallest ones that wouldn't be as affected by getting wet, because it is quite rainy today. But I I was realizing how much of what I make is really just like spacious light and color.
Mm.
And a sense of something bigger than myself, I think, is something that I'm very drawn to. That there's something beyond me, bigger than me, even beyond what I would like in the everyday kind of stop and contemplate or imagine.
Mm.
And I think giving people that sense of largeness allows maybe a sense of perspective to settle in as well. That just like, here I am in my spot,
Mm.
occupying my life. And yet there's so much more
Mm.
than just me and what I'm experiencing and what I'm doing. And yet somehow in light of that, what I'm experiencing and what I'm doing matters.
Mm.
And I think to me, a lot of that has to do with imagination. This is me being tangential about my 2024 resolutions. But going into a new year, one thing that's been incredibly meaningful and pivotal for me is the question of how do I reclaim my imagination?
Mm.
Because and this came up with kind of some of the first paintings we were looking at, but how we experience what we're going through changes based on like our hopefulness and our imagination for it.
Mm.
And I think imagination is innately and intimately tied to our sense of hopefulness.
Mm.
And for me to have imagination about what does the other side of like a dark time or a hard time or a difficult year or a difficult experience look like, I have to have a hopefulness. I have to have enough imagination to hope for something better or to hope for something different. And in terms of like living a meaningful life, I think there's this sense of transcendence. I don't know about you, but for me that I long to be imbued in everything. The sense of there's something more, there's something beyond, there's something outside and yet so intrinsically linked to this little life that I'm living here. And how do I impress that upon other people? How do I kind of open the gateway for them to experience that? How do I help other people to be imaginative with their lives and their experiences? And I think in order to do that, I've had to be mindful that like I need to reclaim my imagination and have a greater hopefulness for myself in order to make anything that might give someone else an imagination for there being something beyond.
Yeah, that gives you like meaning and purpose and puts some wind in your sails. And I think we're very much on the same wavelength in our stage of or this season of life, because so many of the things you're saying, I'm like, wow, this is like exactly what I'm experiencing. Because just this week, I talked to Alexa some about this and another good friend about how I feel like I've really lost the ability to dream. Like I used to be such a dreamer, and then being constantly let down by the grandiosity of my own dreams, and then never really like fully coming to fruition. You just have to like give up on them, and have sort of just become this cold hard business machine, and which again has been great for business, but it's like, is this really that meaningful if I used to have all these dreams and visions? And now I'm like, part of what spurred on the conversation was doing a bunch of wedding expos in the past week, and meeting all these different vendors, and just comparing yourself to with like, oh, this wedding planner is so big, and like you're talking to them and you're nervous because it's like, well, do they like me? Do they think my stuff is good? Like, are they like, I don't know. And I used to never think about that kind of stuff. Even like a little over 2 years ago, I never even used Instagram. I didn't know how, like, I was just kind of doing my own thing, business-wise and photography-wise, and there have been pros to being more social and being in an industry, but I feel like I've gotten so wrapped up in the stuff that I stopped and was like, what on earth? Like, I used to be like this artist dreamer, and now I'm trying to get these people to like me, like the last thing that I would have ever expected to become. And another thing I have to figure out my goals for the year of like, how am I going to remedy that to obviously still want to build connections and like wedding photography and video stuff, and it's a big part of my life and always will be, but to maybe have a healthier relationship and in a way that I can open up dreaming again for more than just like your job.
Yeah. What do we do with those kind of necessary trappings when they impede our ability to actually make meaning and be like actually like alive and creative in what we do? Because there's a reason we're doing it.
Yeah.
It's because it's something we care about and hopefully are skilled enough at to like make a buck or two off of, in terms of like how that translates into career. But yeah, those things that impede upon the imaginativeness. That might be a word.
It is now.
It is now.
I mean, if there's any word that deserves to be imaginatively approached, imagination is one of them. You should be able to make any variation. But we could go to, do you have a specific challenge for people that would just make them more inspired, or just a more like visionary or loving or whatever type of human being? It could be a really simple challenge, but just anything.
In practical terms, this could translate a lot of different ways. But I think I would maybe challenge people to be like extra curious about things that they wouldn't necessarily be, or about people that they wouldn't necessarily be curious about. I think curiosity leads to a lot of good things. I think it's at the heart of a lot of good growth.
Except for cats, right?
Well, no, cats have a special advisory against curiosity.
Yeah. But it's great for humans.
Apologies. But for everyone except a feline, I highly recommend it. Yeah, I think I would say just take unique opportunities to be curious with people and with yourself. Yeah, like we just had a conversation about like, well, certain art speaks to us and certain art like doesn't. But like sit down and figure out why. I think that's a great exercise in curiosity and like kind of naming to yourself like, oh, what does move me? What meaning am I drawn to? What is it to me that's important? And see how that like helps you get to know yourself better.
That is a good challenge. So to rephrase, if anyone's looking for something specific, think of the art that like hits you, and then try to assess like, why is it that hits me the way that it does? I'm definitely going to be doing that.
I'll check up on your progress.
Yeah, please do. And anything else you just want to add about your work or your life?
I'm terrible at open-ended questions.
That's okay.
That's something about me.
Yeah, well, we've said plenty, but it has been really fun.
It's been a pleasure.
We're here at the Ballroom at I Street again. Try to plug them because they're great, and this place is beautiful.
It is.
And got the nice moody lighting, the pretty windows and chandeliers. And but yeah, this is Coral Bradshaw. I'll put links to anything you want me to put links to in the video, and talk to you next time.